€5 billion. Well, that is the size of the government's housing action plan that was published recently. And I suppose now that we're in the Dáil recess, we have an opportunity to weigh up what the government is achieving across the board. The problem, as you all know, with housing is that it takes forever to deliver units, and Wicklow certainly appears to be no different. And John Snell is a Sinn Féin councillor based in Rathnew, but covers issues across the county, and he joins us in the studio on this Saturday morning. John, good morning to you.
Good morning, Niall.
I have a question for you. How many social housing units have been built in County Wicklow in 2016?
Well, the reality is, and members of the public will know, that there's been little or no social houses built in the last 12 months.
But we won't beat around the bush. Will we be honest with this conversation, John? Zero
to this stage, yeah.
Zero.
The reality is that the public are getting to a stage where they're sick and tired of listening to announcements. And while I welcome the announcement that was made by the Minister, the reality is that there is still people out there who are in fear of homelessness, who are waiting on the social housing list for many, many years. And at this stage, they've heard all these statements before, and it's time for action. At this moment in time, Wicklow County Council have sent 10 projects to the department over the last 12 to 14 months for approval. Some have been approved and some haven't for various different reasons. But in the pipeline, Niall, as we sit here today on this Saturday morning, you're looking at 42 units being planned and prepared for in Murphy's Land in Bray here, in Bray Town. There's 20 units have been approved, and the tendering process and that has been gone through, and that's in Brewery Bends and Rathdrum. And then there's a huge amount of responsibility being put on the shoulders of the approved housing bodies, organisations such as Cllr, TUA, and that's probably being unfair by naming just two of, because the reality is there's 504 actual approved housing bodies. Most people will be familiar with perhaps a half a dozen at most. But in the last year there was 32 of units actually allocated to members of the Wicklow County Council housing list in Newtown Mount Kennedy. There was also another 8, so that brought it to 40 in Newtown in 2 different projects. There was 7 units allocated in Greystones, and it was quite a nice project, to be honest, Niall. Took a number of years to come to fruition, but they were specifically, them 7 units in Greystones were specifically for people over the age of 55. They were within walking distance of Greystones town centre. And then the housing staff are, I suppose, all the time looking to build up their housing stock. And last year alone there was 26 units acquisitions, there was house purchases to add to their stock. But in regards to coming in here and giving a good news story, there really isn't, because at this moment in time Wicklow County Council are carrying out the housing needs assessment on all their tenants. That's a long, mundane process. Housing staff have to go through each and every one of them.
One by one, don't they, John?
One by one, and each application could take up to a half an hour to process, compare the previous detail to the current information that they receive. If the housing needs is seen to be different from what's already on the system, obviously it has to be upgraded. And
John, I mean, I looked at even other figures that are out there for County Wicklow. The number of applications for vacant housing refurbishments in 2016, 10 applications in the county. So just because we don't have an overly large amount of time, what are the solutions, John, or what needs to be done differently in your book?
Well, you see, when you're dependent on central government and the department to fund these projects, in regards of a house becomes vacant, if there is up to over €5,000 to be spent on that house, an application will have to be made to the department for the funding, and therefore it has to be brought up to a certain energy rate, and it has to be your certificate has to be of a higher standard. So therefore you're talking about months. We're very lucky in the county at the moment. In one aspect, I remember when I first come on the council in 2009, there was almost 80 vacant housing units in County Wicklow. At this moment in time, there's 12, because the relets, there is more urgency, obviously, and people are more conscious that there is a high waiting list and people need to be getting into these units as quick as possible. But to answer your question, Niall, there is no quick solution, unfortunately.
And I mean, that's the problem, and that's why Simon Coveney, who is the new housing minister, has such a big task on his hand. John, do you think if we do have a general election next year, it's going to be over the issue of housing? Because Fianna Fáil have said that if this government doesn't deliver on housing, they're going to pull the plug.
Well, I really felt that even the last election, like, housing has been an issue for a number of years. We have all sorts of things happening, such as, the rental accommodation scheme, for example. People went on the RAS scheme, and it's known in the local authorities, for the security of a 4-year contract. A lot of people signed up to the RAS scheme believing that they would have that stability. And then the department decided in their wisdom that people who are on that scheme would actually be taken off the housing list. In County Wicklow, we have touching on 700 families in the RAS scheme. And, it's very unfair that in one hand they're asked to, you're only new on the housing list, you're 18 months getting rent supplement. Your best option is go on the RAS scheme, and then to be told that perhaps, the department have changed the goalposts as such, they've moved them, and now they're looking for people to be taken off the housing list. Also coming in at the end of the year is a scheme called the HAP scheme, which is the Housing Assistance Payment. It's just another name for people who are in receipt of rent supplement. There's 100,000 people in the state who are in receipt of rent supplement, and basically what they're saying is, if you're now having your housing assistance payment received, you also should be taken off the housing list. Now, there's no stability in anyone getting rent supplement. It's a yearly contract. And to me, it's only massaging the figures as such to say, yes, there's 100,000 people who are no longer on the housing list because they're getting...
And that's the problem, isn't it? The complexities of it. John, we're just going to leave it there. And to be fair, I think we'll have John Snell back on, because, to be fair, I think housing is the number one issue in the county, and it seems to be the number one issue that's crossing your desk. You're listening to Wicklow This Week.